background as well. And Bev Allen is a professional meeting planner with Helms Briscoe, which is the largest meeting planning company in the country. And Bev has been with Helms Briscoe for about 20 years. We're also going to have other folks in the audience that are going to speak up. Sherry Newman is the Director of Conference Services at Hotel Champlain, and she's got about 30 years as an event manager. And then we also have Ben Mervis from Waterworks Food and Drink, who does a lot of work and plans a lot of events with professional meeting planners. So if it's okay with you, we'll get started. Bev, can you tell me a little bit about your process when you're sourcing a new city for a client? Do you work closely with the CVB or DMO, or do you really go out and search yourself for properties? Hold on, you're on mute. Hold on. Bev, you're on mute.
Okay.
There we go.
I didn't know I could control myself here.
Sorry.
I just want to start with a little bit about myself, because and apologize to Marie, because I wasn't able to get to her before to tell her this, but so my background is actually, I have 30 years experience in corporate operations, and the last 10 of that was in procurement. And I was the travel manager. So my introduction to the hospitality industry was in the travel, business travel part of things. And then I've been with Helms Briscoe for a little over 14 years in the meeting planning and that type of this sourcing. And that's a little bit of a different background than people at Helms Briscoe have, because they often will come from different parts of the hospitality industry. I live in Boston. My clients are primarily corporate, in various industries though, and I source globally, not just in the United States. I have a team of 4 other Helms Briscoe people that I partner with, who help me support my clients. I also have 2 grown married sons and 2 grandchildren that I always have to talk about, and they live in the Boston area also. So to answer your question, I really prefer to do the sourcing myself. What I mean by that is I don't ask a CVB or DMO to actually send out RFPs to places, but I do work with them right from the beginning. So I include, my experience with people who do that kind of job has been positive. Not everybody's has, but I definitely find that, using a location expert is very helpful, and I try to have really good relationships with those folks as well. I think I involve what I involve the CVB or the DMO with is, after a location is on a short list, I'll work really closely with them. And I certainly take recommendations of places to source. I just don't like the RFP to be sent out by, my experience with that hasn't been good. It ends up going out to people that doesn't make sense to go out to. So, but otherwise, I do really use them. We also internally have an internal system that people feed into from their experiences at places, and I consult that, as well as there are over 1,500 Helms Briscoe associates, and they live all over the world. So I will also sometimes use a person in that area as a source.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah. And then Cindy, can you tell me a little bit about your process when you're sourcing a new city? Hold on. You're on mute.
Okay, better? Yeah. So every situation is a little different, and I'll explain that in a minute. But in general, my RFP goes to the CVB or the DMO first, because I don't have the time. So with everything else that I do, we're still hands-on meeting planners as well as site selection. So it's helpful for me to have them take a look at it and say, there's 4 or 5 properties that we work with. There are some situations like just have a meeting that's got to be in West Virginia. There's only 3 properties that it fits, really 2. And even that was a stretch. So I worked with a local host group that I'm working with to have them help me identify what those were. Then I went to the bureau in Charleston and asked for their help with that citywide bid. That was one of the options. Wasn't a great experience. They were very hands-off, didn't really have much of energy to help me out at all. But in general, my relationship with bureaus and DMOs is significant because I use them all the way through the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, I need a resource with boots on the ground, and I can't always rely on someone I know. So beyond the sales process and getting the contract signed, I circle back with them when I'm start to plan. And they're a resource for everything that I would need, transportation, offsite venues. So yeah, very important for us.
Thanks. So what are your initial expectations when reaching out to a hotel in a prospective city? What are the kind of the sticking points for you, your initial expectations, either Bev or Cindy?
Go ahead, Bev. You can take it.
Go ahead, Cindy.
So I think for me, it's a quick response. So sometimes I'll go to a bureau's website or a DMO's website and I'll email the director of sales plus the if the market segments are listed, I'll specifically go to a couple of people. And if I don't hear from them in 24 hours, I get on the phone. So I think just a quick response, even if they're still trying to figure out who it might go to let me know they received it, and they'll get back to me with questions. And I have to say, we do a ton of follow-up because we just don't always hear back quickly enough. So that's generally the way it goes. I just want a quick response, and I want you to abide by the deadlines that I have because those are usually client driven. So it's just a matter of making sure they can do all that given the time frame.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. I said, the quick response is the first thing I would say, and we usually do get a quick response, except for some brands that that are literally, their process is set up that there's no way you're going to get a quick response because they have too many people that it goes through. But what I do is, I also will call to follow up if necessary. Not always. If I'm looking for a city and I'm not getting good response from, I have other choices, I'm gonna, I'm not as bad as some people. Some people literally will not follow up. If I feel it's a really good fit, I will follow up and then maybe have to make a decision later. But it's I guess what I would emphasize is that, all of these kind of parts of the interaction do play into kind of the final decision. And I don't make the final decision as to, where my client's going to go. They do, but they will, ask, and want to know what's, how was the process, the sales process, because whether they should or shouldn't, because it can be very different. The experience with sales versus operations, you can't help but be influenced by that. I would say that, and then in the very beginning of the process, also frequent touches are really, they make a difference. And I don't mean mine, but if someone can't get back to me right away, then them dropping me an email or picking up the phone, either way, to say, got your, acknowledge I got the response, and I'll get back to you, in the next day, or I can't get back to you today. Those go 100 miles. It's so worth it. So I know I will be much more, patient if I know that that's what's going on.
That's great. Thank you. So one of the other things I want to talk about is site inspections or site visits. What are your expectations during the site visit process? Do you want to meet the whole executive team? Tell me, I know it might be based on your client needs, but when you go to a city or you go to a specific property and you're going to have to look at offsite venues, what are your expectations for that process?
Well, that's where I definitely at this point am engaged already with the CDB or DMO, And I rely a lot on, I mean, if I have to set that up and all that detail and deal with everybody separately, I probably don't have time to do it. And it's really a negative, big negative for me. And so, so I work with the CVB to try to do that. My expectations are, I will say that if meeting the executive team or the key people who, the operations manager, the banquet manager, the GM comes and says hello, that is what impresses people when they're there. It's not just about walking through the space. People are making they are definitely forming their opinions, and it will influence their decision if they don't get a good feeling from the site visit, from the people that they meet, and they pay attention to, they look around to see, like what's going on, and what people that you may not have included in the site visit are doing. And I think that, so I think that if you're really prepared to not just talk up, well, to actually, if you show that you've been really prepared for this, something about what the client is looking for, what their hot buttons might be, which I'm happy to share prior to that, then I think that really goes a really long way. I don't know how else to say it other than don't just have somebody that, here's the person who shows people the room they're leading the site visit. It's not gonna be very impressive at all.
And Cindy, how about for you?
I think it's a nice touch, just like Bev said, to have the executive team or general manager come out and say hello. They don't need to stick around long. Don't really want them to stick around long because we got to get business done. But it's nice to know that they're committed to the new business. I like it when I'm on site visits and there's a question about whether something might fit or how it would flow. And if the salesperson isn't really the right person to answer that they make sure they bring in team members that do.
Right.
This will fit. Here's some diagrams, that kind of thing. So not being afraid to sort of say, I'm really not the best to tell you that, but here's someone who can answer your questions. And I think the other thing is, I appreciate a bureau or a DMO to really ask me questions before that site visit gets planned. And I'm like you, Bev, I want the whole agenda planned. I don't really want to do it, but I want them to ask me the right questions and have that conversation ahead of time so that we don't miss something important when we're there. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a city to do a site visit and having lunch with the bureau or the salesperson, the DMO, and all of a sudden things get turned up that didn't get turned up before. And we have to kind of react and shift things around. And that's all fine, as long as there's plenty of time to do that. So I think it's a little bit of a consulting role for someone in your shoes, Mary, which, I know you've been doing this a long time, but not all have.
So that just brings up a question for me as the DMO for our region. When either one of you are in a situation where you're getting ready, you want a site visit set up for the prospective properties, the prospective offsite venues, attractions, or whatever it is, really you want the DMO to get all that lined up and ready to go. So when you come to town, you can just hit the ground running, and we are doing all the site visits. We're, stopping for lunch if we can, and going to the venues and going to the attractions. But you look to the DMO to get all that stuff ready to go for you.
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'm happy to do it. Because as everybody knows, I know everyone. Yeah. So I want to roll into the contracting phase real quickly. And just as far as hotels, venues, attractions, I know this is pretty broad, and I know you may feel that it really depends on the client and the type of event. Do you find that there's anything in the contracting phase that's just a major sticking area for either one of you, just as far as not going to fly, absolutely not going to fly? Is there anything that you find that really sticks out for you when you're in the contracting phase?
Well, let's see. I want to say it definitely, of course, it definitely depends on the client, but But I would say in today's, I'm not sure if this is really the way you want to go on this, but um, broadly speaking, I would say that I'm looking for flexibility and for collaboration when I'm negotiating a contract. So if I don't want to hear this is the way it is, this, and especially this is the way we do it, or even better, this is what we're told we have to do. Because I'm not, first of all, I'm not going to be stopped by that. Second of all, it's just a turnoff if you're not going to be flexible. And I also think the reason I use the word collaboration is because I understand. I mean, I represent the client, but I really understand that the hotel, is a business, and my job is really to be able to represent what my client needs to the hotel or the other venue, and also for me to be able to share with my client the view or why something has to be the way or is being asked to be for the venue or the hotel. And so, I need to not feel like the enemy. On the other hand, don't be confused, whose interest I'm looking for. But I think in today's world, AV costs are ridiculous, and just that is an area that now everybody is paying attention to. And food and beverage costs are also high, and we know that, but I really don't like to hear, you go to the supermarket and it's not relevant. I mean, it's not, there's so much more to the food and beverage cost in your in your venue than going to the store and buying the thing. So you should just know that. I think this, if you don't know this is the reason that food and beverage minimums are important, and they're important to be as low as possible because other risk mitigation terms are based on them. So, I've had lots of discussions about, being asked, like, what did the client pay the last time that they went to, an event for food and beverage? And I'll say, I'm not going to tell you that. I can't share that information. I don't have any clients that are really happy about sharing that. And, but, we can both figure what it will actually be, but that doesn't mean that they'll be happy with a food and beverage minimum that's close to that, because that's not really why that term is important. So I also think that risk mitigation terms are very important certainly to my clients, and I think in general to if anyone knows anything about what they're doing in contracting, then they're going to understand that really, rate is one thing in all of that, and in the process, but what's really important is what happens if things happen that you don't expect, and making sure that both your venue and the client can be protected as much as possible.
Cindy, do you want to add to that?
Sure. With a lot of our right now, we've got federal agency attendees and even state agency attendees that are being affected by either tariffs or just not allowed to travel. And we had an event, one of our largest events was in March, and it would have been 1,200 people until that happened, and we went down to about 600. So luckily we made our room block after we scrubbed it outside, outside the block. We had some language in there that if we dropped 25% force majeure, we could still hold a meeting and not be penalized. So I think back to your point of is creating terms that are going to work when it's an unknown 3 years out. But specifically with government, state and federal, there's always a risk. So we kind of underblock rooms for that reason, and then hope we can grow it. But having as much flexibility with all the terms, the critical terms, and the way that they're written, so that our clients aren't stuck. If we have 2 or 3 years of losses, they don't exist anymore. So that's the reality. So I think anything we can do to avoid that penalty of any kind is really important.
Thank you.
We've started just putting out our classes in advance because it saves a little bit of headache. I used to want to look and see what the hotels have, but they're all so strict right now that, you know, if I can get our terms built in right off the bat, that's probably a quicker process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think also, when you think of the benefit, overall, if the experience is really good, then that client is likely to come back again. You know, all these things add up into what their overall experience is. And I do have to explain to remind my clients sometimes that, you know, when they get really hung up on one thing and say, well, I'm not going to go there again. I'll be like, you know, it's sort of like anything else. Things happen in everything, and especially in our industry, they do. And how they're handled is really key. So you really need to like think about it. All right, so yep, you had this problem, but how was it handled? Well, if it was, then, you know, I think once people calm down, if they're not seeing it right off the bat, once they calm down, they realize that that's what matters, because stuff happens.
That's for sure. So a quick question on offsite venue recommendations for each one of you. If you want to do an offsite dinner, you know, at a restaurant or at a venue, anything like that, and you come to the DMO for recommendations, do you want the DMO to make that connection and introduction? Do you just want, you know, here's the phone number, go ahead and do it your thing? Or do you want the DMO to be pretty involved as far as making the connection?
I think if it's a large enough event, you know, like 500 people off site somewhere, I want them to make that connection. If it's just a list of restaurants for a dinner for 50, I can probably handle that, and I'm glad to do that. But I always want to know what the bureau or the DMO know, and that venue handle that many people. What are the pitfalls? What's gone well and what hasn't there? Because inevitably there's some shortcoming and some benefits to being at a venue offsite with that many people. So it's important to know where there could be some weaknesses to work around.
Because I think the difference in what Cindy and I do, I would say that in all cases, I would want the DMO to be involved. And what I do is I will ultimately connect at that, you know, even if it's a really big meeting, you know, there's somebody in my client's organization that's really, they're the ones that are operating the actual meeting planner, who's doing that function, is much better than me to be connected. Sure. Because in fact, I'd prefer not to even be involved in those contracts, but I will do it for my clients if they ask me to. Usually it's handled by them.
Okay.
But the connection is, I definitely look for the connection. And I don't typically get involved at all with anything beyond that with the offsite venues. I have been involved in, you know, having a relationship with them and you know, that, say, from a site visit, but otherwise not. Where what's really important to me is that both the DMO contact and the venue contact for, say, where the meeting or the conference is going to be, that person, the salesperson, if you will, does stay involved in the sense that at least aware of what is going on, so that I'm not having to, because that's who I'm going to contact. I'm going to always involve that person if there's any issue with my client, you know, whether it's something on the floor that I don't really get involved in, but I'm that involved with my client that I will be the person they go to, and I go, even if I know the operations person at the venue, I will also include the salesperson.
And you will, Bev, hand off the client planner. You will hand that person off to the hotel, but will you also hand them off to the DMO as far as, you know, Mary is your person, all things Burlington, you know, anything you need, consider her a resource. She will take you through whatever you need to do while you're in town.
Yep, I would do that. Because it really, I want them to, I mean, this is why, I don't know if everybody's familiar with the way a company like ours works, but, we're really involved in the upfront part of the planning and very involved in that. And overall involved, the client and all their business is really important to us. So that's good. But I think, it just doesn't make sense for me to be just a middle person when, when they're literally, when it's feet on the street, right? It makes sense for them to be connected. And that's how they understand that I'm not a threat. I'm part of the team, so it's not like I'm taking away any of their relationships. I impress upon everybody how important it is that the client has their relationship as well. I do like to be, I don't like when venues go directly to my client if I'm the one that brought them the business. Otherwise, about any future business or anything else like that, they should be including me. But when it comes to the operation of the event, people who are there and who are responsible should be directly talking to each other, I think.
Yeah. And then Cindy, because you are soup to nuts as far as meeting planning. The same question for you as far as, working with the DMOs, and your client. You don't necessarily hand off, you take it all the way through to execution and post meeting.
That's right. And we are usually working with a host committee or someone from that state. But we remain the contact for anything that's contractual or logistics, all the way through. So it's important for right from the get-go to be connected to those folks.
Yeah, and I'm connected really just for the contractual part, and then, but I'm part of that team. So the difference is that I'm dealing with someone like Cindy is on the team that I'm. In fact,
Right.
Cindy would be the person who is likely my client.
Got it. I'm going to introduce a couple of people that we have in the audience right now. I want to introduce Sherry Newman. She's Director of Conference Services at Hotel Champlain. She's got about 30 years. She started very young, 30 years in the business. She works directly with meeting planners and directly with clients. So I just wanted to have her pop in. And then Ben Mervis is on the call as well. Ben is Director of Special Events at Waterworks Food and Drink, and he's been working with meeting planners and special events for the past 10 years. So I just wanted each one of you to just kind of talk about your experience working with professional meeting planners and what you find are their, again, I want to use the term hot buttons, or what you think their expectations are. I know globally it might be different with each one, but you've both been in the business long enough to, just share some insight with everyone. And Sherry?
She's on mute.
Sherry, you're on mute.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I love working with meeting planners because they know what they want. It's great to be able to get information more quickly, and they know the client, so that works very well. Working with individual clients is a bit different, and really what works well is really learning what their demographic is, what their goals are for the conference, and learning how they want to communicate so you can work through the process together. Yeah, I think just the goals is really key, and whether it's the goals for the site tour that they come on or goals for the overall conference and what they need to obtain at the end is really important to determine.
Thank you. And Ben?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There he is.
I've been trying to be good and keep myself on mute, but thanks for having me, and it's just great to see everybody here. Waterworks, for those who don't know, we are primarily a restaurant. We're open 7 days a week for dinner service every night. We do have a private event space that we opened a few years ago in the same building, just on the back side of the restaurant. And so that has provided a little more flexibility. But whenever we're working with event planners. Much the same as what Sherry said, the goal and knowing what you want is always so helpful because as we all know, there's lots of wedding couples or just private individuals planning their own events who have no idea what they're really getting into. But I would say even with event planners, where I find a hot button topic is we do have a lot of capabilities to do things that are out of the ordinary or out of what you might expect from a restaurant or from a historic venue. So I hesitate, or I try to walk that line between offering too much and then also not holding back. I want everybody to know what we can do, but I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes or too many detours from what it is that you actually want. But I think the other thing that came up earlier that I found interesting is that because we are a restaurant, when it comes to doing a full restaurant buyout, because we're open 7 days a week, we actually can't keep our food and beverage minimums too low. We have to base them on restaurant performance. So I'm always working with event planners to find that balance between a food and beverage minimum and a room fee, because a lot of your clients don't like to see high room fees. But if we're going to lower a food and beverage minimum, we do have to raise that room fee. So finding that balance is just a negotiation. I walk into every conversation with an open mind and a collaborative attitude, and I find that creates great success for all of us.
That's great. Thank you. So Sherry or Ben, have you experienced anything that you would consider a learning experience with working with meeting planners, as far as, again, like, please make sure that you always ask this, or please make sure that you've communicated anything that you can impart on the folks that are listening today that you think is pretty valuable?
I think Ben and I have the thoughts in our minds, looking at his face and mine. I think it's very important to offer diagrams if possible. I find them super helpful on Teams calls as you're planning, to really almost create the diagram as you're going, if they have the time to do so. Because what they envision may not be feasible in the space. So it's important to know limitations. And right along with that is estimated invoices. Avoid any surprises of what that tax and gratuity are going to do to the bottom line. And really, once you have menus, getting all of that out there as early as possible.
Golf clap, snaps, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That true estimate is something that I find a lot of people don't know to ask for. So I just provide it up front. Here is your total all-in cost, because when you're talking about food and beverage minimums and room fees, I mean, that sometimes is only 2/3 of the cost. So to see the bill go up that much can be shocking to folks. I think the other learning lesson, or lesson learned, is just details in the contract, even if it's not something that's really like a contractual term, outlining any limitations or anything that's been discussed that is either a yes we can or no we can't. Putting that in the contract I found to be really helpful, so that in 6 months when we revisit that topic, we actually have a record of what was discussed. And personally, just being able to stand our ground on, no, it's not something that we can do, and we have said that consistently. But we don't like to say no too often.
But that's a really valid point, because there's always the expression is, what if Ben got hit by a bus? And now that meeting planner or whoever it is coming back, 8 months later, and well, Ben said that we can do this. So yeah, that's a very valid point. Just Sherry and Ben, real quickly, during the detailing process, when you're talking about estimates, how many times would you say that you have provided that for the client to keep them abreast? Is it, the function is now you are 90 days out, how many times are you, okay, well, you just added this, just want to make sure you're on top of where your estimates are.
Sherry, you can go ahead if you'd like.
I think the most times I've offered is maybe 3 or 4 times. I've done it as early as contracting with just simply putting in a food and beverage minimum and some estimations that we can make.
Mhm.
But yeah, 3 or 4 times maybe. Once the menus come in, and then there might be a few alterations along the way.
And then go ahead, Ben, and then I'm going to toss this to Cindy as a meeting planner and ask what her expectations are.
We keep our contract. So I do all of our updates in our event software in our contract portal. So it's available to you the entire time. And basically it just gets updated anytime you call me with an update, send me an email, but I basically end every email with it's updated in your guest portal and encourage people to take a look because it does change pretty often. As many times as you email me, it might change. I
Right.
want that to be as clear as possible.
And then Cindy, just from your side as a client and the meeting planner, what are your expectations as far as updated banquet event orders, updated estimates?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cases right now where we're not seeing event orders till a week out. It's crazy. So, and at that point, you don't want any surprises, and there inevitably are some. So, I know hotels are really strapped for staff, and that's been challenging. But the more you can give us earlier on, the better. And things that may be a little unusual, in your policies that we may not necessarily see. I mean, I look at a lot of banquet event orders, and every once in a while, if there's something that I don't find out about till it shows up, I'm like, where did that come from? So I think if there's something that's a little bit different, or that you do something differently than other properties, letting us know that that's how you do it would be helpful. And again, I've seen thousands of event orders, but there's still things that surprise me. One of the things we do in our office, we have 8 meeting planners, and we share lessons learned and success stories all the time with each other. So even if someone has a bad experience or they made a mistake, we want them to share it with the team so that nobody else makes that same mistake, because there's so many nuances to the way we do our business. But yeah, the more often we see the numbers, the better, especially because some of our clients teeter on the edge of profitability, and we need to know if we're getting close to that.
Okay. And then I guess this would be for Cindy, but I'd like Bev I'd like Sherry and Ben. So Cindy, when you are going live with your conference, wherever it is your expectation that conference services manager or director of events is going to be there during your whole process? Or are you comfortable with, banquet captain or food and beverage manager? Do you want that person there that has been your primary contact through the whole planning process?
Ideally, that person would be there on the important days. If they come in on a Saturday for a pre-con and aren't there Sunday, but they're there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm cool with it. Just let me know who my go-to is.
Okay.
So, yeah, flexible within that for sure. But I want to know they're around, and I want to know who's in charge when they're not. So,
who's my go-to? Yeah. And Ben, I know you're there. You live there.
I do. That being said, I try to create the balance. If it's something, first of all, if we've discussed it and you want me there, I'm there. But if it's something that, again, because we are a restaurant, I have a great team of front of house managers who can do just about everything that I can. And as long as I have created the right notes for them in the event order, I've had every single one of our managers on with me for every type of event. So I trust them implicitly, but again, if you want me there, I'm there. And then there's a lot of times that I just want to be there because I like seeing things come to fruition, but we do about 250 events a year, so I can't necessarily be there for all of them.
Right. Thank you. So my next question is, once the event has been executed, it has come and gone, what is your expectation for follow-up from the hotel and the venue or attraction? Are you comfortable with just a simple survey? Do you want a phone call? Do you want a personal email? What are your expectations from the hotel or the venue as far as follow-up? Cindy?
All that's good. Yeah, some kind of, especially from the DMO or the CVB, just a thank you for bringing your business to town, you know, and how did it go? Because they may not know, they may not have been around those 4 or 5 days. I'm fine doing surveys. I'm fine with a phone call. And in some cases, there's a relationship that's years with certain cities. So it's better to get on a face-to-face because I know them and I want to continue that relationship. So yeah, definitely follow up, no question.
I want to chime in here because I know I would say that that it definitely isn't one thing, because there's some people that really, I think there should be feedback like at the end of the conference somehow, right? The opportunity for the people that have been working together to have a debriefing of sorts. Not a big deal, but I mean, the more that's planned, although you may find that the client doesn't have the time to do it, that's good. But also then a combination of I think if the venue is proactive about that, that's great. And definitely I like to be included in that, because sometimes I'll hear feedback that I will be happy to share with you that you may not have heard. Because I think, if you don't get the feedback, you can't do anything. So, and it should be good as well as areas that were a problem. Because a lot of times what I'll get is, it was great. The only issues were such and such, but they weren't a big deal, and so therefore they may not mention them at all to you. And yet, every little bit is matters. But I think also, so that is okay. It's okay from where I sit. If you're working with someone like me or us, being copied on requests for feedback is good. You don't have to worry about, do I just go to Bev or do I whatever. That's also where I think the direct connection is, direct communication is good and positive. I think it's seen as positive.
We also appreciate the feedback on how we communicated with you. So what could
Exactly. Yes.
differently? Did you like our tools that we use? So when it's a bigger program and they're more complicated, it's important for us to know if we're communicating in a way that's useful with them. So the property.
Good point.
Yeah.
And that's definitely where I think I'm working with, if you are working with someone like me, please give me that feedback about me or them. And it's true too that the venue may not really want to be on, they may be uncomfortable giving the feedback to my client, but you can give that to me and I will choose either to give it to them or not, or how I give it to them. But it's important for them to get some feedback as well as me. I'm always open to feedback.
That's great. So just kind of wrapping up a little bit here, Bev, is there anything else that you would like to share with the group as far as a couple of takeaways, anything that you think would be beneficial? We've got some great seasoned veterans on this call. We also have some new folks. So if there's anything that you could share with them that you think would just make their jobs more enjoyable, would make the relationship with meeting planners more meaningful?
I think that the points around getting the goal, what the client's goals are, the meeting planner's goals are for the event, is very key and can sometimes be hard to get. So maybe not surprisingly, but they either may be planning so far in advance that they'll literally say, well, all we know is it's going to be this big and they want it, in this part of the world or country. And that goes also with, what is the budget? So I would say most of the time, honestly, most of the time my clients can't answer that question, which is sort of mind-boggling to me, but still, but it's really true. And so I think that trying to get some understanding about what they can spend is really important. And I, of course, try to do that. But I think then when you really get down to it and you're talking to them directly about, about the details of their plan, you need to keeping that on the forefront is a great idea. And trying to find, even if it's a not to exceed kind of budget, or giving them examples of, well, like, so it could cost this or it could cost that, and you'll often get a reaction to that. Oh, I don't think, most of the time you're going to get, well, I don't know, you tell me, and then I'll go find out, if that's okay. So anyway, I think that's important. Overall, I really think listening and being responsive from the very beginning to the end, and communication, whether it's with the front part of the process I'm dealing with, or as you go along, is really just really important. And I think clients that I work with always, they really value that. And I guess the other thing that I'll say again is the impression that the venue gives from the beginning of the process, I'll call it the sales process, is definitely influences a decision in the end. You got to keep that in mind. So it really matters. You could have, if there's a bad experience, you also kind of want to know that right away so that you can rectify it, even because that can happen too. Feedback, say to me after the sales experience, hearing from someone in sales, someone's boss, to say, how was that? Just like I like to hear that feedback, I think is good to give us, because and for us to give you, so that and I will usually say, this has been really difficult. And I've had clients say, don't want to go back there. We had so much trouble with them, either in the initial contracting thing or something that came up to be rectified later. They'll just say, don't want to do that again,
Well, Cindy, any takeaways that you would like to share?
So I think, to Bev's point, if it's a bumpy contracting process, that feeling that a planner has doesn't really go away even 2 years later. That remember those things. So the relationship's really important. And I know those of you in sales, I used to be in sales. It was a totally different ballgame back then. It's really hard to connect with your clients. It's really hard to, unless you're going to see them in person on a site visit, really hard to kind of let them know how much you care about their program and that you want their business. It's really hard to do through email and texting or whatever. So I think finding those touch points where you can get to know someone. And, I know for me, I'm doing a program at the Greenbrier, and it took a couple of Zoom calls to really work with her to get her to understand what we needed. But now we have a great relationship, and the contract process was very smooth because we had that time ahead of time. You don't always get that luxury, but it does come down to the relationships in the end. And I know that's getting harder and harder to do for all of us,
I totally agree with that. And that's why, I find, I have this, like I said, I went to a job where you could interact with people all the time for 30 years, and working from a home office from the beginning. So not just COVID. I just get out. I literally go to anytime that I can meet with, whether it's venue people or, it's really very often with venue people. And if I can bring clients to things that, that the venue is offering, really build a relationship. And it's really important. It still is a very relational business.
I agree 100%. I do. I'm going to throw this out to everybody. Is there anybody in the listening audience that has questions for Cindy, Bev, Sherry, or Ben? Any questions or anything you folks would like to share? Experiences that you have had that you'd like to share? And you're all on mute, so you're going to have to unmute. Emily Young? Yeah.
Hi, Emily Young. I'm with Sugarbush Resort in Warren, Vermont. Thank you so much for taking the time, Bev and Cindy, and sharing your expertise. It's really invaluable, I think, even to people who've been in the sales game for a while, since meeting planner needs are changing, ever changing. We learned that in COVID. I had a couple of things that I wrote down. One, Bev, it was with regards to your food and beverage minimum versus like the estimated food and beverage total that you're maybe talking about in terms of average menu pricing and what they think their agenda is going to have this break and this lunch and what have you. When you say cushioning that, that amount in the contracting to help mitigate some of the risk in terms of attendance dropping and maybe agendas shifting, is there a I guess percentage difference that would make sense in your mind that you kind of target as a reasonable difference between that initial estimate and then what is actually contracted for the food and beverage minimum? Do you build that into the attrition clause where you say with regards to not just rooms attrition, but food and beverage? Obviously, if someone can't come, they can't eat. But if you could speak a little bit to what, and either of you can answer this, what you'd like to see so that it becomes palatable, because I think all of us do want to work with you in a way that makes sense where we can still plan accordingly and present menu
So like,
options that make sense.
I understand totally when Ben was saying, that, there's I know there's an expectation of an amount of revenue that for the use of space, right? And so, yeah, there are times that I have that we traded off a room rental fee for, like, I've gotten a room rental fee reduced because we'll increase the food and beverage minimum, knowing that there's that kind of relationship. But there's no percentage. In fact, I'll be totally honest with you. It's get it as low as you can get it is the rule, because the terms that I'm referring to that tie to it are cancellation will be, a percentage of this and a percentage of that. So you want it to be the lowest number you can get so that if they have to cancel or if they have attrition, it will impact that payment less, the payment for the pain, which everybody's experiencing, right? When it comes to, the other factor that I do take into effect when I'm trying to negotiate that is if I have, and I usually do have, food and beverage minimums to compare them to, because from the other quotes that you get, if I can think of something right now that my client really wanted to go to this one place, and their original proposal said it was going to be $2 million minimum food and beverage. She said, there's no way that I will agree to that. And then the other quotes were like $1.5 million, $1.8 million. She came back and my client said they wanted it to be $800,000. And I'm like, not happening. It's like, and I know what they're going to be. They're going to probably spend $2 million, right? Maybe $1.8 million or so. Maybe it's not exactly 2 million, but I understand why she doesn't want it to be 2 million. But it's unrealistic for it to be. If I see that everybody else is saying 1.5 million or 1.8 million, we're not going to get this to 800,000. That's not realistic. So I actually might go back and say to a hotel, I need you to get that as close to 1 million as you can, and see what happens, right? And in that hotel, when I told them that's not going to work, they came back with, well, maybe, if you do this and you do that and do this, it could be $1.8 million. I'm thinking, that's probably not going to work either. But that's the reasoning there. And I think also when people think of when they're thinking, the reason that I would say to somebody, listen, they're insisting on a room rental as well as a food and beverage minimum. I'd prefer there to be no room rental and just describe it as food and beverage. But if not, the reason that you negotiate it, you can be higher than that, is to say you'd rather be eating something than just paying rent, So that's how I can explain it to my client. You're really, you're probably going to spend that much more anyway. So if you're going to have to pay one or the other, make it something that you actually can consume.
Thanks, Beth. I think Lynn Bordinelli, did you have a question?
Not really a question. Because I've worked with both of you before, I just want to say thank you for providing detailed RFPs. I think that if any of us seasoned folks look at RFPs and we look at where you've been, we can kind of guesstimate sort of kind of where maybe some expectations are, whether it be room rate budget or food and beverage or any of those things. But getting a detailed RFP with specific space, if there are hot buttons for the client, so much appreciated. Because we, as I'm sure we can all say, we all sometimes get those that are like, I need meeting space for 2 days. How much is that going to cost? Right. So can't really do much without that, with that. But I just want to say thank you for yourselves and folks like you that provide us with the information that we can make a timely and intelligent response back to you quickly.
That is actually all the time we have. I want to thank Cindy and Bev for taking the time today. I know you're both extremely busy. Thank you so much for doing this with us and being such a great panel and educating a lot of us on things. I want to thank Sherry and Ben also for jumping in and sharing their experiences as far as working with meeting planners and expectations. And more importantly, I just want to thank you all for participating. It means a lot to us, and it shows us how much support you give to Hello Burlington. And we'll be sure to do some other webinars like this in the future.
And
So
please, you can feel free to share my contact information. I'm happy to talk to anybody. Doesn't have to.
I will. Yeah.
Same with me.
Yeah. I want to thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for your time.
Give it up for the queen of the court, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.
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 Bye.